The grand tribunal pulsed with a low hum of hushed anticipation. Lawyers rustled papers, spectators murmured softly, and the distant thud of a gavel echoed from another chamber. Judge Anya Sharma settled onto her elevated bench, her gaze a steady professional calm. Just another day, another case, or so she believed. The bailiff's voice cut through the air. The Commonwealth of Astoria versus Orion Finch. Anya shifted subtly, her hands resting on the gleaming obsidian of her bench. She scanned the charges, laid out before her: assault, larceny, resisting apprehension. A familiar ache of disappointment tightened in her chest. Another soul ensnared by the relentless gears of the system, she mused. Then, as the defendant was escorted in, her world spun on its axis. The man standing before her, wrists and ankles bound, was no stranger. He was Orion Finch, her Orion. A lump formed in her throat as a torrent of memories surged, the endless summer afternoons spent racing bicycles down the sun-dusted lanes of Riverbend, Astoria, the late-night whispers beneath the ancient weeping. Willow in her backyard, the solemn childhood promises to always stand by each other, come what may. But the man shackled before her wasn't the boy she remembered. His shoulders were bowed, his face etched with years of hardship, yet his eyes, those deep, fathomless eyes, were unmistakably his. Anya's grip on the gavel faltered. For the first time in her illustrious career, she hesitated. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in as she struggled to comprehend the impossible. Orion looked up, his expression a complex mix of shock and weary resignation. Recognition flickered in his eyes, only to be swiftly veiled as he lowered his head. The tribunal waited. Anya forced herself to speak, her voice a carefully calibrated instrument. "Mr. Finch, you stand accused of assault and larceny. How do you plead?" Orion's voice was rough, almost a stranger's. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She yearned to stop everything, to demand answers. What had happened to him? How had their paths diverged so dramatically? But her role as a judge demanded an unwavering facade of composure. "Proceed," she commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. As the prosecutor launched into their opening statements, Anya's mind raced. This wasn't merely a case, this was Orion. And somehow she had to disentangle her past from her present before it was too late. The tribunal blurred as Anya's mind drifted back to a time long before her black robes and the weighty gavel. She and Orion had grown up on opposing sides of Riverbend, Astoria, separated not by mere distance, but by the unspoken strictures of their divided town. Her family's home was a modest cottage with a vibrant rose garden, while Orion's family resided in a weathered dwelling at the edge of the whispering fields. Their friendship had been an anomaly. She recalled their first meeting, an accidental encounter at the Crystal Creek's edge, where she had ventured too far from her own backyard. Orion had been fishing, his line hopelessly snagged in the reeds. She had offered a simple hand, and that small gesture had blossomed into years of clandestine adventures and shared aspirations. "Anya," he had once said, stretched out beside her on the grass beneath a canopy of stars, "do you ever dream of leaving this place? Truly getting away? Going somewhere people don't look at us strangely, just for sitting together?" She had laughed then, dismissing the idea. But Orion wasn't joking. Even as a child, he saw the world with an unblinking clarity, a place that didn't always embrace those like him. Their bond deepened despite the whispers, the sidelong glances, and the outright disapproval from both their communities. But the pressure was a constant companion, a silent weight neither could shake. And then, one day, it all fractured. It was the summer before high school when Anya's father discovered them together on the porch. His voice had been cold, razor-sharp with authority. "Anya, inside, now." She had hesitated, her gaze darting to Orion, who stood frozen. "Go on," he had said quietly, his voice tinged with resignation. "I'll see you around." But they hadn't seen each other again. Not truly. Her father forbade her from going near Orion, and soon after, Orion's family moved away. Anya immersed herself in her studies, her ambitions carrying her far beyond the confines of Riverbend. She pursued law, driven by dreams of justice and impartiality. But she never forgot the boy who had shown her what true bravery looked like. Now, seated on the bench, she wondered what had become of Orion after she had walked into that house, closing the door on their friendship. His record detailed a series of arrests for minor infractions, petty theft, loitering. Nothing that screamed a violent nature. But then again, how much of a person's life could one truly glean from a few lines on a rap sheet? The prosecutor's voice snapped her back to the present. He was detailing the alleged crime. Orion was accused of assaulting a shopkeeper during a larceny at a convenience store in Crimson Peak. The shopkeeper had sustained minor injuries, and the cash register had been emptied. Orion was apprehended a few blocks away, the cash purportedly still in his possession. Anya studied Orion as the prosecutor spoke. His posture was slumped, his hands clasped before him, but his expression was inscrutable. Had he truly done it, or was there a deeper narrative beyond the prosecution's claims? The tribunal adjourned for a midday recess, granting Anya a moment to gather her scattered thoughts. As she re-entered her chambers, her assistant, Lyra, approached with a hesitant expression. "Judge Sharma, are you quite all right? You seemed somewhat preoccupied." Anya hesitated. Should she confide in Lyra? Would it be unprofessional to admit her connection to the defendant? Instead, she shook her head. "I'm fine. Just a great deal on my mind." But she wasn't fine. How could she be, when the past she had so meticulously buried was sitting mere feet away, awaiting her judgment? The tribunal was packed when the trial resumed. Reporters scribbled furiously, the clerk shuffled documents, and the prosecutor, a sharp-featured man named Silas Thorne, was poised to deliver his case. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Thorne began, his voice firm and unwavering, "this case concerns violence. It concerns a man who entered a convenience store and, without provocation, attacked an innocent shopkeeper before absconding with the contents of the cash register. The evidence will demonstrate that Orion Finch is guilty of this egregious crime." Anya felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The prosecutor's tone was clinical, detached, as if Orion were merely a name on a ledger. She glanced at Orion, whose gaze remained fixed on the table before him. The defense attorney, Kara Veris, rose to present her opening statement. She was young, yet possessed an undeniable confidence, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "The prosecution would have you believe this case is simplistic, but it is not. My client, Orion Finch, has consistently maintained his innocence. We will present evidence showing that there is much more to this narrative, and that assumptions made on the night of the arrest will not withstand rigorous scrutiny." The first witness was called to the stand, a shopkeeper who had been working on the night of the incident. He described seeing a man fitting Orion's description enter the store, argue with the cashier, and then lunge over the counter. His testimony was detailed, yet something about it felt rehearsed, almost too perfect. Kara's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Thorne, you stated that the man who attacked the shopkeeper was wearing a crimson cloak. Is that correct?" "Yes," the witness replied, his tone clipped. "Did you clearly see his face?" "Not entirely. It was dim, and he had the hood drawn up." Kara nodded, pacing subtly. "So you're asserting you couldn't definitively identify the individual who committed the assault?" "Well, no, but—" "No further questions," Kara interjected, cutting him off. Anya noticed Orion shift slightly in his seat, his shoulders squaring, as if the exchange had offered him a small glimmer of hope. The next piece of evidence was surveillance footage from the store. The video was grainy and poorly lit, depicting a figure in a crimson cloak entering the store. The prosecution contended that the person in the video was Orion, but the poor quality made it nearly impossible to discern any identifying features. As the video played, Anya studied it intently. Could this truly be Orion? The figure moved swiftly, grabbing at the counter before vanishing off-screen. The footage abruptly ended, leaving an unsettling void in the narrative. Orion's defense hinged on an alibi. He claimed he had been walking home from a friend's dwelling at the time of the larceny. The friend, however, was unwilling to testify, citing fear of reprisal from the community. Kara argued that the absence of a willing witness did not negate Orion's innocence, but the jury's expressions hinted at skepticism. As the trial progressed, Anya felt the immense weight of her position pressing down on her. She was meant to be impartial, a bastion of fairness, but how could she be when every moment was a poignant echo of their shared childhood? The boy who had once been her closest confidant was now a man fighting for his liberty, and she was the one entrusted with determining his fate. When the court adjourned for the day, Anya lingered at the bench, her fingers tracing the smooth edges of the gavel. She yearned to speak to Orion, to ask him directly what had transpired, but she knew she couldn't. Any contact outside the courtroom would jeopardize the case and her entire career. As she watched Orion being escorted from the room in shackles, Anya's resolve wavered. She had always believed in the justice system, in its inherent capacity to illuminate the truth. But for the first time, she wondered if the truth was something it could ever truly grasp. The grand tribunal buzzed with subdued murmurs as the trial reached its pivotal moment. It was the defense's turn to present their case, and Kara Veris called her first crucial witness, Officer Kalen Thorne, the arresting officer. Anya leaned forward imperceptibly, her eyes narrowing. This was where the fissures, if any, might begin to appear. Officer Thorne, a burly man with a gruff demeanor, took the stand. Kara approached him with deliberate calm. "Officer Thorne," she began, "you were the one who apprehended my client, correct?" "That's right," he replied, his tone clipped. "You stated in your report that Mr. Finch was walking 2 blocks from the scene of the larceny when you detained him. Is that accurate?" "Yes." "And what led you to believe he was the suspect?" Thorne shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He matched the description, a dark-haired male, mid-40s, wearing dark clothing. Kara's eyebrows arched slightly. Dark clothing? But the suspect in the video was described as wearing a crimson cloak. "Did you discover a crimson cloak in Mr. Finch's possession when you searched him?" Thorne hesitated. "No, but he could have discarded it." Kara took a step closer. "Could have? Did you or any other officer conduct a search of the surrounding area to locate this supposed cloak?" Thorne's jaw tightened. "No, we didn't have time. He was apprehended quickly," Kara pressed on. "So to clarify, you arrested my client based on a vague description without any physical evidence definitively linking him to the scene." The officer's silence resonated louder than any words. Anya's gaze flickered to the jury. A few members exchanged uncertain glances. Kara wasn't finished. "Officer Thorne, do you recall if Mr. Finch said anything at the time of his arrest?" He protested. "Said he was innocent?" "And did you consider investigating his claim, or did you assume guilt based solely on his appearance?" Thorne's face flushed. "I followed protocol." "Protocol?" Kara repeated, her voice laced with skepticism. "No further questions, Your Honor." The tribunal hummed anew as Thorne stepped down, his credibility visibly shaken. Anya's heart pounded. This was more than just a trial now. It was a reckoning, not just for Orion, but for a system that seemed all too eager to condemn him. The defense's next move was unexpected. Kara introduced an expert witness, a forensic analyst who had thoroughly reviewed the surveillance footage. The analyst explained that based on the height and build of the individual in the video, there was no definitive way to confirm it was Orion. Furthermore, the timestamp on the footage appeared to have been altered, raising serious questions about its reliability. The prosecutor attempted to dismiss the testimony as mere conjecture, but the jury seemed unsettled. A palpable shadow of doubt crept into the room, and Anya could feel its immense weight. As the day drew to a close, Orion was given the opportunity to testify on his own behalf. Kara had warned him of the significant risks, but Orion insisted. He stood, chains clinking softly as he approached the stand. His voice, though quiet, carried a raw sincerity that pierced the silence. "I've made mistakes in my life," Orion began, addressing the jury directly. "I've taken wrong turns, trusted the wrong people. But I didn't do this. That night, I was walking home, minding my own business, when the officers stopped me. They didn't ask questions. They simply decided I fit the bill." His voice cracked slightly as he continued, "I've been fighting my whole life, fighting to be seen as more than what people assume about me. But I'm tired. I just want the truth to matter." Anya's throat tightened as Orion sat back down, his words hanging in the air, a plea not just for justice, but for basic humanity. She glanced at the jury, their faces a complex tapestry of emotions, doubt, empathy, and uncertainty. This was it. The truth was no longer confined to evidence or testimonies. It was a battle of conscience, a struggle against the crushing weight of prejudice and assumption. Anya knew that her role wasn't merely to uphold the letter of the law. It was to interpret it in a way that served true, profound justice. The final day of the trial dawned, heavy with anticipation. The closing arguments were delivered with meticulous precision. The prosecutor leaned heavily on the circumstantial evidence, urging the jury to implicitly trust the system's process. Kara, however, pleaded for the jury to look beyond the superficial, to consider the gaping holes in the case and the undeniable humanity of the man on trial. Anya listened intently, her face a mask of impassivity, but her mind raced. Her role was unequivocally clear. She could not sway the jury, but she would have the ultimate authority if their verdict left any room for interpretation. The immense burden of ensuring genuine justice weighed heavily on her. The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity. The tribunal emptied and refilled as people stretched their legs or whispered conspiratorially among themselves. Orion sat quietly, his hands clasped tightly before him. He hadn't met Anya's gaze since the first day of the trial, and she couldn't truly blame him. What could she possibly say to alleviate any of this? Finally, the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict. The room fell into an immediate deafening silence as the foreperson stood, a piece of paper trembling slightly in her hands. In the case of the Commonwealth of Astoria versus Orion Finch, we find the defendant— The pause was unbearable. Not guilty. The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps, murmurs, and even a few triumphant cheers. Anya tapped her gavel, restoring a fragile order. Orion's shoulders sagged, as if an invisible weight had been lifted, but his face remained inscrutable. He had won his freedom, but it was abundantly clear that this victory came at a profound cost. Anya addressed the court, her voice steady and resonant. "The jury has spoken. Mr. Finch, you are free to go. Court is adjourned." As the tribunal emptied, Anya lingered behind, watching Orion as he signed his release paperwork. For a moment, she thought he might depart without a single word. But then he turned and approached her. The room was nearly deserted now, just a few clerks tidying up and Lyra gathering files. Orion stopped a few feet from the bench, his expression guarded. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly, his voice raspy. "But I'd like to know— Why didn't you say anything? You knew me." Anya felt her throat tighten, the words catching. "Because I couldn't. I had to be fair. If I'd said something, it might have jeopardized the entire case." Orion studied her, his face a complex blend of hurt and understanding. "Fair," he repeated, a ghost of a bitter laugh in his voice. "That's the thing, Anya. The world's never been fair. Not for people like me." She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the polished obsidian of the bench. "You're right. I wish I'd done more back then. I wish I could have done more now." Orion sighed, the tension in his posture easing imperceptibly. "We were kids. We didn't know any better. But you know now, don't you?" "I do," Anya said, her voice firm and resolute. "And I'm truly sorry." Orion gave a faint nod, then turned and walked away, his back straight, as he disappeared through the grand courthouse doors. Anya sat alone in the empty tribunal, the profound weight of his words pressing down on her. She had upheld the law, but the trial had unveiled a deeper truth. Justice wasn't just about verdicts and evidence. It was about the lives irrevocably shaped by systems far larger than any single person. For Anya, it was a seismic wake-up call, a stark reminder that her position was not merely a seat of power, but a vital platform for meaningful change. As she left the tribunal that evening, the fading sun casting long, dramatic shadows across the courthouse steps, Anya made a silent, unshakable vow. She couldn't alter the past, but she would dedicate every fiber of her being to ensure the future held more than hollow promises of fairness. It would be arduous, perhaps even impossibly difficult, but she owed it to Orion and to herself to try.